I'm telling you, Emma, my best friend Natalie said. He's a typical guy. He'll hear your proposal and only think about what he stands to gain. I don't like the idea of him being with others, I replied. Natalie, I didn't say he'd sleep with anyone. Emma, he's 40 and past his prime. Do you honestly think he's going to be charming 20-year-olds every weekend? He'll stay home with the kids, and you can enjoy your freedom. Don't you think that might backfire? I asked, looking at my friends and coworkers. Emma, Ryan is dying to be with you, Julia chimed in. If you ask for it, you'll have the fun you want without guilt, Sophia added. Your husband will be too busy with work and the kids to notice. Just keep him happy occasionally, and he won't suspect a thing. The more we talked, the more appealing the idea became. I'd been married to Jack for 18 years with 2 kids, a house in Bristol and annual family holidays. We worked hard and were mostly happy. But as my 40th birthday approached, I felt an itch for something more. My husband adored me and still had a romantic streak, but I couldn't shake the feeling of monotony. That's when Natalie planted the seed of possibility. My work friends often discuss modern relationships too. I wasn't sure Jack would agree, but they kept encouraging me to broach the topic. Tomorrow night after dinner I'll talk to him, I promised them. It'll be fine, Natalie assured me. He'll probably be relieved. And if you need a backup plan, one of us can help keep him distracted. The thought of my friends with Jack made me uncomfortable, but if it meant I could explore the idea of other relationships, I'd make peace with it. The idea of new boyfriends intrigued me. Before Jack, I'd only dated a few guys, and those relationships didn't last long. I'd never had a fling, but the attention of younger men at work reminded me I still had something to offer. It boosted my confidence. When I got home, Jack was oblivious. He hugged me warmly, completely unaware of what I was contemplating. I felt a pang of guilt and even shed a few quiet tears. The next day was Sunday, and as usual we planned a family outing. Our teenagers, though, were more interested in spending time with their friends. Dinner was uneventful, the kids glued to their phones as usual. Don't worry, love. The only thing distracting me is you, Jack said with a wink. His words stung, knowing what I planned to tell him later. After dinner, Jack enforced the no phones rule he always insisted on, and the kids eventually engaged in the conversation. But after the meal I told them, I need to talk to your dad. This isn't for little ears. Are you having another baby? Our daughter blurted out, excitement in her voice. No, nothing like that, I said quickly, noticing Jack's curious expression. It's just something important. He poured us both a glass of wine and sat across from me at the dining table. Normally outgoing, Jack had a quiet, thoughtful side. He was the type who believed in saying little but listening well. Are you happy? I asked him, fidgeting with my glass. With what? With us. With everything. I've got a wonderful wife, great kids, a lovely home, and a good life. Of course I'm happy. I'm glad you feel that way, I said softly. But I'm bored. Jack paused, studying me carefully. You're bored? Yes. I love you, but I need more excitement in my life. Am I not enough for you? It's not about you, Jack. It's about me. My needs. I took a deep breath and sipped my wine. I've been reading and talking to friends. Relationships are evolving these days. Don't give me that trendy nonsense, Jack said, his tone sharp. What are you trying to say? I want an open marriage, Jack. I think we should explore dating other people. His expression darkened, and he gripped his wine glass tightly. Say that again? I think we should open up our marriage. You could meet new people too. Think about it. Maybe even younger women. Jack's silence felt heavier than the air around us. Then finally he said, absolutely not. We made vows to forsake all others, and I take those seriously. Have you? I do take our vows seriously, Jack. But people grow and change. This could be good for both of us. We can still love and respect each other. His jaw clenched and anger flickered in his eyes. He stood abruptly, walking toward the door. Where are you going? To clear my head, he said. My wife just told me she wants to sleep with other men. I need space. His voice cracked as he left, muttering something under his breath. I didn't see him again that night. When I woke the next morning, his side of the bed was untouched. I got ready for work and joined the kids at breakfast. "Where's Dad?" I asked. "He left early," my son said. "Said he might be late tonight," my daughter added. For the first time in our marriage, Jack had left without kissing me goodbye. Felt like a physical ache. At work I sent him a text. "I love you." I avoided mentioning our conversation from the night before. At lunch I tried calling him but it went to voicemail. I left a message about how much I cherished him and how I dreamed of growing old together. That evening when I arrived home his car wasn't in the driveway. My stomach churned imagining him at a bar or worse. He came home later than usual, his face unreadable. No kiss, just a brief greeting before Ethan disappeared outside. The kids didn't seem to notice. At dinner, he chatted with them as usual but barely spoke to me. Afterward he asked the kids to head to their rooms saying he needed to talk to me. This time there was no wine. He sat across from me, his expression tense. "I know you won't let this go, Clara," he said flatly. "Your friends are filling your head with nonsense. I looked into open relationships today. I know if I say no you'll just end up cheating on me. Either way I lose." He raised his hands in mock surrender, his voice bitter. "Okay, you win. But there are rules. No men in our house." "I wouldn't do that," I assured him quickly. "Our bed stays sacred. Lovers must use protection until they're tested for STDs. I don't want to date or meet your lovers. And if you've been with someone, don't expect us to be the same afterward. From now on, I'm not responsible for your romantic, emotional, or physical needs. Do you understand?" Distracted by the thought of potential lovers, I didn't fully grasp what he was saying. I figured this would be temporary, a year or two of fun before everything went back to normal. Ethan stood abruptly. The anger had drained from his face, leaving only contempt. His eyes betrayed a deep pain, and I knew it was my fault. Still, I reminded myself of Natalie's advice. Be selfish for once. He would eventually get over it, I told myself. He didn't come to bed that night. Alone, I downloaded a dating app, created a profile, and waited for messages. Then I called Natalie. "So, how did it go?" she asked, her voice brimming with excitement. "He agreed, but he's not happy," I admitted. "His ego is bruised, but he'll deal with it. See? It's fine," Natalie assured me. "Young men today are amazing. Or maybe I've just been lucky. Enjoy yourself." The rest of the week was frosty at home. Ethan returned to bed after a few nights but only to sleep. He said a terse good night and turned his back to me, making no effort to touch or speak further. By Friday morning I decided to move forward. Over breakfast I casually told him, "I'm going out with the girls tonight." He barely glanced at me, gave a faint hum and picked up his bag. Without another word he walked out the door. At work my coworkers were thrilled to hear about my plans. I showed them the outfit I'd packed and they cheered me on. Natalie texted me throughout the day, boosting my confidence. By lunchtime, I'd already been messaging 3 young men. When I invited James out for drinks, his reply came almost instantly. "Are you serious?" he asked. "Did your husband actually agree to this?" "Don't mention him," I responded. "Just know I'll be at the Lantern with my friends. If you show up, you might keep me company." "What time?" he asked, sounding eager. I smiled, giving him the details. By 5 p.m., I had changed into my outfit, touched up my makeup, and was ready for the night. At the bar, Natalie and the girls were already surrounded by admirers. James arrived shortly after, his face lighting up when he saw me. We found a booth and started talking, but the tension between us was undeniable. When I suggested moving to my hotel room, he didn't hesitate. Janet gave me a knowing cheer as we left. At the hotel things escalated quickly. Afterward I showered, dressed, and checked out, ignoring the receptionist's disapproving glance. At home the house was quiet. The kids were asleep and Ethan wasn't in bed. I found him in the study, asleep on the couch. Gently I shook his shoulder. He stirred, opening his eyes to meet my gaze. His expression was cold, detached. "Go back to sleep, Clara," he said flatly, rolling over and ignoring me. "Aren't you coming to bed?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. "I'm in bed," he replied curtly. "I told you the rules. Do you really think I'm going to share a bed with you after tonight?" "Fine then," I snapped, turning on my heel. In the bedroom, I changed and got into bed. The space beside me felt emptier than ever. If Ethan wanted to sulk and sleep alone, that was his choice. But if this continued, I thought I might not come home at all. For the first couple of months, I limited my dates to Fridays and Saturdays, trying to preserve some semblance of normalcy. But Ethan rarely slept in our bed anymore, and the kids were beginning to notice. When I confronted him about it, his response was sharp. "Do you want me to explain to them what you asked for?" he growled. "You agreed to it," I countered, my voice trembling. "Under duress," he spat. "You were going to do whatever you wanted anyway. But I wasn't giving you a divorce and you weren't taking the kids. I would never have taken them." "Clara," he said, his tone icy, "your behavior is hurting them. They know something's wrong. I wouldn't touch you now. I don't know what diseases you're bringing into this house." His words stung more than I expected. For a moment, doubt crept in, but I pushed it away. This was the choice I'd made, and there was no turning back now. His words took my breath away. I knew Ethan was upset, but his anger and resentment were intense. I considered snapping back at him, but I knew it would escalate. Things grew colder between us. We were a marriage in name only. We hadn't been intimate since I asked for an open marriage. Did I miss him? Yes, I missed being in love with my husband and the way he held me. But I wasn't ready to give up my new lifestyle. Almost every weekend I had a new date from Tinder. Natalie and the girls suggested meeting regularly after work, so my outings increased to weeknights and weekends. Sometimes I didn't make it home, staying at Natalie's or a friend's house when I was too drunk to return safely. I started keeping extra clothes at work or at Natalie's to save time. After 6 months, there were weeks I barely went home. I was living my best life, or so I thought, but I didn't realize the damage I was doing to my marriage and family. I'll be honest from the start. The night Clara asked for an open marriage, my love for her died. Some might wonder how I could fall out of love after 20 years, but betrayal and disrespect have a way of doing that. With a few selfish words, she destroyed our vows. It felt like an excuse to cheat guilt-free. As I stood outside that night, cooling off, I knew I had to handle this calmly. It was clear her friends had coached her into this. I needed to talk to someone. I called Emily. "Hi, Ethan." "Hi, Emily." "Okay, what's wrong? We've been friends for 35 years. You can't fool me." Everything spilled out, my anger, my pain, my hatred. I hated my wife because she had ripped my heart out. I don't remember the exact words I used, but I know they weren't kind. "Are you sitting down, Ethan?" Emily asked. "No. Sit down. I'm going to tell you what to do. This won't be like my situation with Adam. You have to play it differently. Rely on me." What should I do? Part of me wants to walk away, but I can't leave the kids. And custody battles rarely favor men. I'm not going to be a part-time dad. "Stay married out of convenience," she said firmly. "Turn off your emotions. Don't be her shoulder to cry on. And the thought of making love to her after she's been with someone else? Forget it." "Exactly," I muttered. "Cut yourself off emotionally, but keep the house and kids. Focus on yourself and them. Go to the gym. Find hobbies. Reconnect with old friends. Most importantly, be there for the kids. They'll understand what's happening." "And if she falls in love with someone else?" I asked. "Then she'll have to choose. Stay with the family in name only or leave. Either way, you'll still be there for the kids." Part of me wanted to leave immediately, but I couldn't bring myself to. "I'll use the gray rock method," I decided aloud. "I'll show no emotion, keep my interactions with her short and unrewarding. Hide everything." "That's the right move," Emily said. "Her request shows disinterest in you and the family. Focus on your kids. If you divorce, wait until the youngest is 18. Live as neighbors if you have to." "Thanks, Emily. Always here for you, Ethan. Focus on yourself and the kids." Will I forgive her? No. You'll divorce eventually. For now, you'll just be roommates. That's a good mindset, I said quietly. One more thing, Emily added. I know it's tough, but you need to take advantage of this. Women will love you. You're successful, in shape, and a great father. Go on dates. I'm not sure I can. Just think about it. You deserve happiness too. Going Grey Rock was hard. I snapped at Clara more than once, each time berating myself afterward. But she got what she wanted, so why would she care? The first night she stayed out with someone else nearly broke me. She even had the nerve to ask me to join her in bed when she came home. I barely restrained myself from saying exactly what I thought. Any lingering love for her died that night. I'll always care for her as the mother of our children, but the passion was gone. I hardened my heart, bracing myself for what was coming. Following Emily's advice, I focused on myself and the kids. I hired a personal trainer, resumed going to the gym, and even took up cooking for the kids. My daughter loved it, and we bonded in ways we hadn't before. When Clara started disappearing on weekends, I sought advice from my younger sister, Marie. She ragged on me for putting up with it but understood when I explained it was for the kids. "You should just leave and be with Emily," Marie said one night. "She's the one you should have married," I muttered under my breath. Marie raised an eyebrow but didn't press. "When was the last time you talked to Clara about this?" "Last week at dinner. We only talk about the kids. She's always on her phone. Dating apps. 3 of them. I saw dozens of messages." Marie shook her head. "You're in better shape now than when you got married. Don't let her drag you down." I nodded, appreciating her support. The gym became my escape. Every punch I threw at the bag was aimed at my frustration. I was rebuilding myself piece by piece, and for the first time in a long while I felt like I was getting stronger mentally and physically. Clara might have killed the marriage, but she wasn't going to kill me. "An absolute strumpet," Emily muttered under her breath one evening when the kids had gone to bed. I didn't disagree, but I didn't say it out loud. Emily had become my anchor. The kids adored her. She was their Aunt Emily in all but blood. As Clara drifted further from our lives, Emily filled the gaps, especially for my daughter. She had a knack for knowing when someone needed her presence, her warmth, her words. We spent many evenings together after the kids went to bed, talking, laughing, and sometimes cuddling on the couch. It never went further. Neither of us was ready for that. But her presence gave me a comfort I hadn't felt in years. One night, during dinner, my daughter broke the fragile silence. "Daddy, why do you put up with this?" she asked bluntly. Clara was there, eating silently. She didn't seem to notice the comment or the fact that I'd moved nearly all my belongings out of our marital bedroom. "Yeah," my son chimed in. "Kids at school teased us, but we went along with what they called Mom." My stomach dropped. "What did they call her?" "Nothing nice," he said, looking down at his plate. "We're not the only kids with divorced or weirdly married parents," my daughter added with a shrug. I sighed, catching Emily's reproachful gaze. She didn't need to say anything. Her look was enough. "Did your mom ever explain what's going on?" I asked carefully. "Not really," my daughter said, pushing her food around with her fork. "She just said things might change in the future." "Dad, we're not little kids. We know everything from the internet," my son added. "Just tell us. We won't judge you. At least you're here." I can't even remember the last time Mom said 3 words to me. My daughter wiped her cheeks, tears threatening to spill, and Emily immediately pulled her into a hug. "I won't go into all the details, kids," I said softly. "Your mom changed our relationship, and I agreed because otherwise we would have lost the house." "And you?" my daughter asked, looking up at me. "Do you still love her?" "No," I admitted bluntly. My love for her died when she made the request, and completely when she came home late after her first date. "Does she even love us anymore?" my daughter asked, her voice trembling. Emily hugged her tighter, glancing at me for guidance. "Of course she does," I said, though the words felt hollow. "Funny way to show it," my son muttered, his face set with anger. I took a deep breath. "Look, kids, all I can do is continue to be the father I've always been. I'll always be here for you no matter what." Emily chimed in, her voice warm and steady. "And I'm here too. Your dad's not alone in this. I'll always support you both." My daughter leaned into her hug, whispering, "We like you, Emily." "Yeah," my son said with a smirk. "You make Dad happy." He's smiling again. The comment made me blush, but Emily just smiled. A knowing smile that made my heart ache and feel lighter at the same time. Months passed and our lives adjusted. I built an addition to the house, my own private space with a bedroom, office, and living area. The kids loved it, and it became a place where we could all relax and play together. When I worked from home, they kept me company. When Emily visited, it gave us the privacy we needed. Clara and I communicated only through text, mainly about bills or the kids. I stopped caring about what she did for a living or how she spent her time, as long as her paycheck went into the joint account for household expenses. Slowly, I erased her from my life. She was no longer the beneficiary on my life insurance, and I removed her from other critical documents. Everything was for the kids. Emily stayed over more frequently, though our relationship remained unhurried. We shared a bed sometimes, but intimacy wasn't about physicality. She understood I wasn't ready. She held me when I needed it and whispered words of love and patience. "She's a fool," Emily said one night as we lay in bed. "She has no idea what she's thrown away. And you still have to go on dates." She shook her head, laughing softly. "I'm a patient woman, Ethan. I can wait." Clara's perspective. I confess, once given the freedom, I went a little wild. I've been a faithful wife and mother for nearly 20 years, dedicating myself to my family. But now it was time to live for myself. Yes, Ethan had the same freedom. He could have taken advantage of it too. He agreed to the arrangement after all. He could have said no. We might have argued, but I would have understood. Deep down, I knew I would never have cheated on him. But with this new freedom, I dove into Tinder dates. Some were disasters, but many young men were eager to take me to a hotel. Time flew by as I lived life to the fullest, or so I thought. I kept up with the bills and stayed in touch with the kids sporadically, but I knew Ethan avoided me. When I tried to spend a weekend at home, the reality hit me hard. "Hi," I exclaimed, stepping through the front door. "I'm home." The house was quiet except for the clatter of dishes in the kitchen. There Ethan sat with the kids and Emily. She was smiling, laughing with them as if she belonged there. My stomach twisted, but I approached the table anyway. Ethan's eyes met mine briefly, filled with cold disdain. "What are you doing here?" my daughter asked, her tone sharp. "I'm here to spend time with my family," I said, forcing a smile. She scoffed. "Funny, we haven't seen you in weeks." I faltered, looking at Ethan for support. He said nothing, returning to his meal. "Is there room for me?" I asked, gesturing to the table. "No," Ethan replied flatly. I glanced around, noticing the subtle changes in the house. The living room looked different, the walls repainted. Photos of us as a family were gone. When I walked into the bedroom, I realized he hadn't slept there in months. Opening the double doors, I saw a spacious living area with a small bedroom section tucked to the side. A television, bookshelves, and a sleek desk made the space look like an entirely separate home. "What is this?" I asked, my voice sharp. "My part of the house," Ethan replied flatly, barely looking up from the coffee mug in his hand. "And why did you build it? Why didn't you tell me?" He didn't respond immediately, but his expression said it all. The kids smirked knowingly, and when I glanced at the dining table, Emily's hand rested lightly over his, a gesture she didn't bother hiding. "Why are you here, Mom?" my daughter asked coldly, her tone laced with annoyance. "Aren't you supposed to be on a date with one of your boyfriends?" I turned to Ethan, furious. "Do they know? Did you tell the kids about our arrangement?" "They've been asking where you've been," he said without a hint of apology. "I told them the truth. I won't lie to our kids for you. You had no right." "It was your decision, Clara," he interrupted. "You've barely been home for months," my son added, his voice as detached as his father's. "Honestly, I'm surprised you're even here." "Why are you here?" my daughter pressed. "We were having a nice dinner until you made it awkward." I clenched my fists, glaring at Ethan. "Are you going to fix our kids' attitudes?" "No," he replied, his focus still on Emily. "They're teenagers. They're entitled to their opinions. Besides, you've given them plenty to form those opinions on." "Do you even know how old they are?" my daughter challenged, her voice trembling with hurt. "You missed my birthday. And my team's grand final," my son added bitterly. Their words hit me like a punch to the gut. As they cleared their plates, Emily motioned silently for them to leave the room. They obeyed without a word, glancing back at me with disdain that stung more than I cared to admit. Ethan stood, walked to the fridge, and grabbed a beer. He leaned against the counter, sipping it slowly. "So, Clara," he said after a long pause, his voice devoid of emotion, "why are you here?" "I wanted to spend time with my family this weekend," I said, though the words felt hollow even to me. He shrugged and nodded toward the kids' rooms. Good luck with that. I'm busy tonight and this weekend. You can ask them if they want to spend time with you, but don't hold your breath. I spent 5 minutes trying to talk to them, but they barely looked at me. Their answers were short, their body language screaming disinterest. Defeated, I walked back to the bedroom, the one that once felt like ours but now felt foreign. I sat on the bed feeling utterly alone. Okay, I muttered to myself. If that's the way it is, I'll just leave. Grabbing my bag, I headed for the front door. See you later, I called out, trying to sound unaffected. Probably not, my daughter shot back, her sarcasm slicing through me. I slammed the car door shut, gripping the steering wheel as tears streamed down my face. First, I blamed Ethan for everything. But then, as his look of indifference from the night I came home after my first date replayed in my mind, I began to question myself. Had I ruined everything? Had I underestimated him? Maybe my friends were wrong, maybe their husbands would have tolerated it, but Ethan was always proud. I cried harder as the weight of my choices crashed down on me. My marriage had become a hollow shell. Ethan had completely disconnected from me. We were married only in name, and I doubted we'd ever go back to the way things were. I couldn't turn to my friends, they'd only led me astray. I needed clarity, but I didn't know where to find it. After driving aimlessly for an hour, I pulled into the parking lot of a bar. My mascara was smudged and I knew I looked a mess, but I didn't care. I needed a drink. Inside, I ordered a cocktail. 1 drink turned into 2, and 2 quickly turned into 3. Is this seat taken? A voice asked, pulling me from my thoughts. A man stood beside me, his expression warm and kind. No, it's not, I said, sniffling. But I'm not sure I'd be good company. Maybe you need company more than you think, he replied with a soft smile. It's not right to see someone sitting alone, looking as sad as you do. He ordered a drink and gestured to the bartender to refill mine. Need someone to talk to? I hesitated. I'm not sure you'd want to hear my story. Try me, he said. I've got time. I sighed and told him the outline of my situation. He listened intently, nodding in understanding. When I finished, he ordered another round. Do you want to fix your marriage, Clara? He asked gently. I don't know if Ethan will ever get our relationship back on track, I admitted. He's just so angry. And honestly, I don't know if I can fix it. How can you fix anything if he won't talk to you? I just want him to love me again. I whispered. These other men, they don't love me. They're just distractions. He held out his hand. I'm Tom, he said. I shook it weakly. I'm Clara. Now we're not strangers, he said, his smile disarming. We talked for hours. By the time the bar was closing, I knew I couldn't drive. You can stay at a hotel, Tom suggested, or you could come to my place. I have spare bedrooms, and I promise I won't expect anything. Exhausted and tipsy, I agreed. Tom called a cab, and I grabbed my overnight bag from the car. His house was modest but comfortable. He showed me the spare bedroom where I set my things down. Later, as we sat on the couch with nightcaps, he placed a hand on my thigh. You're a beautiful woman, Clara, he said softly. Have you ever thought about finding 1 or 2 lovers who really make you feel special? I don't want to fall in love with someone else, I replied. You can love more than one person, he said, his voice gentle. I smiled faintly, unable to shake the weight of Ethan's absence from my heart. The next morning, I put on spare clothes and met Tom in the kitchen. He greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, and we sat down for breakfast. As we ate, we talked more about our lives, and I learned something surprising. He was in an open relationship too. I'm always honest with any woman I meet, he explained. I don't wear my wedding ring when my wife isn't around because it's uncomfortable, but I always tell the truth before we sleep together. Do you and your wife see each other often? I asked, curious. Only about once a month, he said casually. Do you have children? They're grown and live with my wife most of the time, he said, sipping his coffee. Do you have many mistresses? In the early days, I slept with any woman who was interested, he admitted. But now, I prefer real relationships, something meaningful. His openness fascinated me. He made his choices sound so effortless, so balanced. What are your plans for the weekend, Clara? He asked, taking my hand. I don't have any, I replied honestly. Would you like to spend it with me? His voice was warm and his eyes met mine. I saw a beautiful, upset woman last night and wanted to comfort her. I also hoped she'd take an interest in me. I smiled at his words. I'd love to spend the weekend with you, Tom. Tom's wealth surprised me. His house was luxurious with high-end furnishings, and his car was something Ethan and I could never afford. The day flew by as we spent time together, and by evening, he took me to an upscale restaurant. We danced until late, and I kissed him first, making him smile. In the back of the cab, I leaned into him, snuggling against his chest. When we got home after midnight, we sipped drinks and talked quietly before heading to his bedroom. On Sunday morning over breakfast, Tom gave me advice I didn't expect. Our open marriage works because my wife and I live apart and agreed on everything beforehand, he said. But you surprised your husband and forced him to agree. That's not the same thing. I looked down, feeling the weight of his words. You should repair your relationship with your children, he continued. Figure out how to make things work, for their sake and yours. What about Ethan? I asked hesitantly. Tom shrugged. From what you've told me, he sounds like a good man. You pushed him into this and he might never forgive you. But if you want to mend things, it starts with honesty. He's a wonderful man, I admitted, my voice cracking. Almost as wonderful as your wife must be. Tom smiled wistfully. I love my wife and plan to retire with her soon. When I'm home, this all ends. And she's okay with that? She misses me but has 2 lovers while I'm away. When I'm home, all her attention is on me. It works because we both agreed to it. It's not perfect, but we avoid jealousy and resentment. His words made me think. I'd been so caught up in my own desires that I hadn't thought about how to make my arrangement with Ethan sustainable, or how it was affecting my children. After we spent the afternoon together, Tom drove me back to the bar where my car was parked. With his arm around me, I realized how much his advice resonated. One-night stands were thrilling but left an emotional void. Tom, a man with principles and balance, made me see things differently. Keep in touch with your husband, he said as we hugged goodbye. The most important thing is your children. Rebuild that relationship. I'll do my best, I promised. When can we see each other again? As soon as you want, he said with a chuckle. But promise me you won't get jealous if I meet someone else. I laughed softly. I'll try not to. Maybe I'll find a semi-permanent boyfriend too. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Now you're thinking clearly, Clara. You've had your fun and that's fine. But now you realize you need something more serious and lasting. Maybe someone who truly cares about you. I hugged him tightly. I'll call you soon. I'm looking forward to it, Clara. I watched him drive away before getting into my car. Taking a deep breath, I started the engine and drove home, rehearsing what I might say to my family. She's here to keep me company, Ethan said flatly, his voice calm but firm. Not that you have the right to tell me what to do. We have a free relationship, remember? I'm just exercising my rights. The jealousy bubbled in my chest as I watched Ethan and Zara finishing dinner preparations. Cindy sipped her wine, smiling warmly at him, completely at ease. Zara had always been close to her father, but now, seeing their bond grow even stronger in my absence, stung more than I expected. Ethan graciously pulled out a chair for me at the dinner table, but I was quickly left out of the conversation. He continued chatting with Cindy and Zara, their laughter occasionally punctuating the air. After dinner, Ethan walked Cindy to her car. I peeked through the curtain as he waved her off, his smile faint but genuine. When he returned to the house, I stood near the doorway waiting. Ethan, I said quietly. He stopped and looked at me, his face calm but void of warmth. He wasn't angry, but he wasn't inviting either. Can we talk? I asked. He sighed, crossing his arms. About what, Clara? About us. I'm still your wife. You're still my husband. I still love you, I said, my voice trembling. I never wanted this to happen. Ethan didn't explode like I feared he might. Instead, he clenched his fists briefly before sitting down at the table. You wanted an open relationship, Clara. I accepted. But when was the last time we slept in the same bed? He asked, his voice quiet but pointed. I opened my mouth to respond, but he continued. I told you from the start. I won't share a bed with my wife after she's dated other men. I meant it then and I mean it now. I won't be your emotional support, your physical support, or anything else you decided to outsource. If you want love and affection, go find it elsewhere. This is what you wanted. His words cut deep. I was happily married, he continued, his eyes hard. Now I'm married in name only. And Cindy? You brought another woman into our home. I accused, my voice rising slightly. We've done nothing in this house, he replied bluntly. And who she is doesn't concern you. I don't ask about your lovers and you don't ask about mine. I couldn't stop myself. Do you even care? Ethan stood, looking at me with something akin to pity. Everything that's happened is a consequence of your decisions, Clara. I warned you, be careful what you wish for. You got what you wanted but didn't think about how it would affect our family. Later, I sat in the living room, aimlessly flipping through channels on the TV. My son Matthew wandered in, his gaming headset hanging around his neck. I patted the cushion next to me, and he hesitated before sitting down. Do you miss your mom? I asked softly. Yeah, he said, his voice low. I wanted to say more, to tell him how much I regretted my choices, but the words felt hollow. After a while, Matthew left to return to his game. Knowing Ethan wouldn't share a bed with me, I turned off the TV and walked to his part of the house. One door was closed but the other was ajar. I peeked in and saw him sitting on the couch with Zara curled up next to him, trembling as she cried. My heart ached, knowing I was the cause of her pain. I considered stepping in but decided against it. If I entered, things would only escalate. Instead, I sighed quietly, closed the door, and returned to my empty bedroom, our bedroom though it no longer felt like ours. Ethan's perspective. Emily's advice had stuck with me. If Clara could have fun, so could I. It didn't take long to realize how many women were interested in a successful 40-year-old man. Friends and coworkers set me up. And while I initially hesitated, I soon embraced the opportunities. Cindy was 25, with a bright smile and an infectious laugh that made her hard to resist. Charlotte, 28, was a career-driven woman who knew exactly what she wanted. Melissa, in her early 30s, was a lawyer with sharp wit and an adventurous streak. And then there was Jessica, 21, the daughter of a coworker who had made her interest in me very clear. Your wife is an idiot, Jessica had said boldly on our first date. The only surprise is that this arrangement works at all. I'm jealous sometimes, but I know it's not forever. She wasn't wrong. The arrangement wasn't ideal, but it had given me clarity. You think Emily's afraid to commit to you? Jessica asked one evening, tilting her head curiously. Maybe, I admitted. We've always loved each other, but it's been platonic. Then you need to show her how you feel, Jessica said matter-of-factly. How are you so young and so wise? I teased, making her laugh. All your girlfriends think it's a good idea, she said, leaning closer. We all love Emily and agree you two are perfect for each other. Her confidence made me smile. Jessica clung to me, her arms wrapping around my neck. Don't feel guilty, she whispered. Sometimes a woman just needs to know she's wanted. The next morning we had breakfast together before I drove her home. After a lingering kiss, she walked inside with a contented smile. Back at home, Matthew was yelling into his gaming headset while Zara worked on something at the dining table. I kissed Zara's head as I passed her. Have you two been okay the last couple of nights? Daddy, I'm 16, she said with a grin. I can take care of myself. And your brother? I asked, smirking. He hasn't been too annoying, she replied. Good to know. I leaned back against the counter. Any sign of your mother? Not since Wednesday, she said with a shrug. Fair enough. What do you want for dinner? After dinner, Matthew disappeared back into his game, and Zara stayed to help me clean up. When the kitchen was tidy, I grabbed a beer and stepped out onto the deck. Zara followed, settling onto my lap like she had when she was younger. Daddy, are you happy? She asked, her voice quiet. Happy with you and Matthew? Absolutely, I said, brushing her hair aside. Happy with my current situation? No. But with my personal life besides your mother? Yes, I'm quite content. I think Mom has a boyfriend now, she said, watching me carefully. Good for her, I replied simply. You really don't care, do you? No, honey, I said gently. We live separate lives. The only things we share are you two, some finances, this house, and a piece of paper. She frowned, her brow furrowed in thought. You've met some beautiful women, haven't you, Daddy? Yes, I admitted. I've met 4 wonderful women who all know I'm married. They know it's not forever, Ethan told Zara gently. They know I'm not leaving my marriage because of Emily. Zara leaned closer, whispering, Daddy, are you in love with her? She rarely called me Daddy anymore. And when she did, it was always because she had something important to say. I sighed, pulling her into a hug. Emily is my best friend, Zara. She's been by my side longer than anyone. I've helped her through breakups, and I've even fought guys who mistreated her. Sounds like love, Daddy, she said softly. Your mother took my love for granted, I admitted. Emily never has. We've never been in a relationship, but I can rely on her more than anyone else. Your mother always knew that. Emily even warned her. If she broke my heart, she might end up wanting to be with me. But are you having fun in the meantime? Zara asked, tilting her head. Emily knows everything I do, I said. She even encourages me. That's what friends are for, Dad, Zara replied with a smile. But I'll be thrilled when you marry her. I blinked, surprised. Wait, what? Did she say something? No, Zara said with a shrug. But you deserve to be happy, and Mom hasn't made you happy since she made that request. Are you going to divorce her soon? No, I said firmly. She lives her life and I live mine. When you and your brother leave home, we'll divorce. Until then, we'll keep things as they are. Emily arrived on Tuesday night, and Zara seemed determined to play matchmaker the entire evening. Matthew was oblivious, focused on his video games, but Zara's little comments and knowing glances made me cast her more than one reproachful look. After the kids went to bed, Emily curled up beside me on the couch, wrapping her arm around my waist. She started giggling. Your daughter wasn't subtle today, Ethan, she whispered. No, she wasn't, I said, rolling my eyes. She's been talking about us getting married. Emily pressed closer. And what do you think of that idea? I hesitated. We need to get a divorce first, I said carefully. Do you love me, Ethan? Emily asked softly. I looked at her, my expression serious. The only people I love more are my children. And Clara? She asked hesitantly. I don't love her anymore, Emily, I admitted. So apart from my children, yes, I love you the most. Emily's eyes shimmered with emotion. I loved Clara more once, I continued. We dated, married, had kids, and built a life together. But now, I think about you a lot, Emily. I'm grateful to Clara for giving me 2 wonderful children, but I don't feel the same about her anymore. Emily stayed with me that night. We didn't cross any physical boundaries, we weren't ready for that. Zara was thrilled to see Emily at breakfast the next morning, chattering away happily. Matthew, meanwhile, mentioned that his mother had apologized recently and promised to be more present. She's been showing up more often, he said casually. She even invited us to dinner every week, but Zara won't go. Walking Emily to her car later, she paused and said, I'd like to stay the night again soon. It's fine, I replied, as long as we stick to the rules. Clara came home on Wednesday evening, hoping for a family dinner. Unfortunately for her, I had plans with Cindy. Please stay, Ethan, she begged as I grabbed my jacket. I turned to her with a neutral expression. It's not my fault, Clara, I said. But we can. I have plans, I interrupted. The kids know I won't be here tonight. I'll see them tomorrow. Can't you stay? Please, for me. I glared at her for a moment before walking out the door. Cindy was waiting for me at the pub, and Clara didn't need to know about it. It wasn't her business anymore. He hates me, I muttered, snuggling up to Tom later that week. I slept at home alone most nights, but these moments with Tom, usually 3 times a week, had become my escape. I hadn't found a second steady lover yet, and I wasn't sleeping around as much, but the ache of Ethan's rejection lingered. I think it's over, I admitted to Tom. Do you know what he's doing? Tom asked. I chuckled bitterly. Zara loves telling me about all the women he dates. She hopes he divorces me and marries Emily, his best friend. And these other women? They visit the house. Ethan cooks for them. He used to cook for me. And Zara? She's not happy with me. She takes pleasure in watching our marriage fall apart. She blames me for everything. She's her daddy's little girl. I paused, trying to steady my emotions. I broke his heart, Tom. He shut me out completely. Zara knows what he's thinking better than I do. What are you going to do? I think my daughter is right, I said quietly. I don't know how to save my marriage because Ethan won't talk to me. We only discuss the kids or finances. I text him about how much I miss him, but he never responds. I don't call because I know he won't answer. Tom pulled me closer, his arms strong and reassuring. He made me feel better the way he always did, by making love to me. Tom was reliable and kind. I loved spending time with him. Our dates, weekends together, and deep conversations. Though we tried not to discuss our other partners, they came up occasionally. One night, as we lay in bed, Tom turned to me with a question. How would you feel about going on trips with me? He asked. Trips? I asked, intrigued. I travel a lot for business in the States and Europe, he explained. I won't be so lonely with a beautiful woman by my side. What about your wife? She's too busy to join me, he said with a shrug. I want you to come, Clara. Really? I love spending time with you, he said, smiling warmly. And I want you to keep me company while I'm away. How long would I be gone? A couple of weeks to a month, depending on the deals I'm working on. I'll need to tell the kids, I said cautiously. Of course, Tom said, nodding. I know Zara's 17 and Matthew's 15. They're old enough to understand. How was her birthday? Tom asked over dinner one evening. Awkward, I admitted. Both families know about the situation. I thought Zara didn't want me there, but I think Ethan insisted. Maybe there's still some love left. He knows my relationship with Zara is strained, but Matthew, he still loves me. I hear from him almost every day and try to call him every night. Tom smiled warmly. When do you need to decide about the trip? As soon as possible, I said. You're leaving for the States on Thursday, right? On Monday, I came home to find no guests for once. Ethan was in the kitchen with Zara preparing dinner. They both turned to look at me when I entered. Are you here for dinner? Ethan asked, his tone neutral. Yes. Do you mind? It's still your house, Clara, he replied, a flicker of something softer in his voice. I almost cried. It was the kindest thing he'd said to me in months. Matthew noticed me, got up and hugged me. He was growing taller every time I saw him, already nearly as tall as his father. For the first time in what felt like forever, the four of us sat down to dinner together. The conversation was sparse, but I couldn't stop stealing glances at Ethan, hoping for some sign of warmth. After dinner, Ethan surprised me further by serving dessert. Ice cream with chocolate sauce. The atmosphere felt relaxed for a change, but I knew I was about to ruin it. Ethan, I began hesitantly. I know you don't want to hear about my personal life, but Tom has asked me to go on a business trip with him. Ethan didn't look up from his dessert. If it affects the children, I'll listen, Clara. He wants me to accompany him on trips. His wife doesn't want to go, so he asked me. It means I won't be around as often. It's okay, Mom, Matthew said with a shrug. Where will you go? To the United States and Europe. Zara said nothing, her face impassive. Ethan finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then he asked a question I hadn't expected. Do you love him? I love you, Ethan, I answered quietly. I'm still your wife and you're still my husband. I didn't ask that, Clara, he said, his tone sharper. I asked, do you love him? I don't know, I admitted, looking away. I enjoy his company. Then I met his gaze. And do you love everyone you're with? Ethan smirked faintly and started clearing the table. Zara stood up to help him, effectively ending the conversation. I retreated to the living room, feeling both relieved and dejected when Matthew joined me. Later that night, I was already in bed when the door opened. A warm body slipped in beside me, and for a moment, I froze before realizing it was Matthew. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered, turning away from me. I hugged him tightly, tears spilling over. Thank you, baby, I whispered. His love was the one thing that still felt steady in my life. I spent the next 2 nights at home before leaving for the trip with Tom. On our first trip together, Ethan and Zara were polite but distant. Matthew, ever the peacemaker, was affectionate, sensing my loneliness. Dad always said we should keep in touch with you. Matthew told me, making me smile through my sadness. On Thursday morning I packed my bags. Ethan had already left for work, and Zara was as cold as ever over breakfast. As she got up to leave, I asked, "Can I have a hug?" She hesitated but eventually leaned in for a brief hug. "I really love you, Zara," I whispered. "You're my firstborn. I hope you have a good time," she murmured, then left without another word. Matthew hugged me tightly before heading out. "Take pictures if you see anything cool, Mom," he said, his smile warm and genuine. Tom picked me up a few minutes later and I left. Over the next few months I traveled frequently with Tom, visiting North and South America, Asia and Europe. He paid for everything and introduced me as his partner. I developed a crush on him. He was romantic and generous, filling a void I didn't realize had grown so large. But one day as I scrolled through social media, reality hit me hard. Ethan hadn't blocked me, and his posts served as updates for family and friends. Seeing pictures of him and the kids on vacation in New Zealand felt like a punch to the gut. Neither he nor the kids had mentioned the trip to me. What stung most was seeing Emily in many of the photos, her presence more prominent than I'd expected. Tom found me crying after lunch. Wrapping me in his arms, he glanced at my phone. "I feel partly to blame," he said softly. "You're spending a lot of time with me. Maybe you want to stop traveling for a while and reconnect with the kids." "Are you sure about that, Tom?" He smiled, brushing my tears away. "I love you, Clara. You deserve to be happy." His words made me smile, though my heart still felt heavy. When I returned home, I tried to spend more time with the kids and balance my relationship with Tom. It wasn't easy to find a moment alone with Ethan, but one evening I cornered him. "You took the kids to New Zealand?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Yes," he replied simply. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted to give them a vacation. They hadn't had one in years." "Why exclude me?" "Because you were with your boyfriend," he said bluntly. "I would have canceled." Ethan turned to face me, his eyes cold. "I'm not going to pretend we're a happy family just to fulfill your needs, Clara. I wanted to take our children on vacation. You were too busy jetting around the world with your boyfriend." "And Emily?" I asked, my voice trembling. "She came along to help with the kids and keep me company while they had fun." His words stung, but I couldn't argue. Deep down I knew I had no right to. "Emily is my best friend and has been my support since this arrangement began," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "I invited her over for company. She's been there for me." "What about Christmas?" I asked hesitantly. "What about it? Are you planning anything? Am I involved?" "That's up to you, Clara," he replied, his tone neutral but distant. "Ethan, if you just talk to me," I pleaded. His eyes turned cold. "We have nothing to talk about, Clara. Since the night you made your request, you've made your thoughts about our marriage clear." "I miss you," I whispered. "I want my husband back. I can't remember the last time we shared a bed." "And that's your fault," he said sharply. "I refuse to be carnal with a wife who wants other men." "But you agreed to it," I said weakly. He chuckled bitterly, shaking his head. "You still don't get it. I never wanted this. I wanted my wife to stay faithful. You pushed for an open marriage and I had to agree or lose you. Either way I lost." "I would never cheat on you, Ethan," I said, my voice trembling. "You were so eager to be with other men. Don't take me for a fool, Clara. You're with other women too, Ethan. Don't make this all about me." He stepped closer, his anger softening into something more resigned. "Your friend Natalie put this nonsense in your head," he said quietly. "Did you know her husband finally kicked her out? She partied and brought men home while he stayed with the kids." I froze, shocked. I hadn't spoken to Natalie in months and never imagined she'd be so reckless. I realized Ethan had likely pieced everything together from the start. "I didn't know that," I admitted. Ethan's expression was emotionless. "You took advice from people who destroyed their own marriages, Clara. There's no going back." He stepped even closer. "Why did you do it, Clara? Was I a bad husband? A bad lover? Did I make you unhappy?" "I was bored," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "Not good enough," he said, shaking his head. "Boredom isn't a reason to tell your husband you want other men." Tears filled my eyes as I met his gaze. "I can't explain without making things worse." I already know, Ethan said bitterly. You listened to bad advice. You thought their stories about freedom and excitement were worth more than our family. I nodded, ashamed. Janet said it was never fair. He sighed heavily. I never wanted anyone else, Clara, he said, sadness lacing his voice. Until that night, I was a happily married man. Your request showed complete disrespect for me and our marriage. For the first time since the night of my request, we were speaking openly about everything. But I knew this wasn't a beginning, it was an end. Ethan's love for me, at least as my husband, was gone. What do we do now, Ethan? I asked, my voice shaking. We keep the arrangement until the kids are 18, he said firmly. Then we'll decide. I burst into tears, and to my surprise, Ethan stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. His touch broke me completely, and I clung to him, sobbing into his chest. He gently stroked my back, his voice soft. We'll spend Christmas together, Clara, he said. But I'm living my own life now. Our marriage is practically over. You should realize that by now. I don't want to lose you, I cried. You're my husband, Ethan. I still love you. He sighed but didn't let go. You're holding on to something that's already withered and died, he said. Even if you stopped everything today, we've both changed. What we had is gone. Finally, he released me, giving me a moment to wipe my eyes. When I looked at him, his gaze held no warmth, but he understood my pain. Do you want some dinner? He asked casually. I almost cried again. It had been so long since we'd eaten together. We cooked something simple, and though the conversation was awkward at first, it slowly eased. After a couple of beers, we even started reminiscing about the past. Where are the kids tonight? I asked. Zara's out with friends. Matthew's at a sleepover, he said. I was just enjoying a night alone. It's okay, Ethan, I said quietly. I think we needed this conversation. Zara doesn't hate you, he said after a pause. She's Daddy's little girl and doesn't like that her mom has a boyfriend. What does she think about Daddy having a girlfriend? I asked with a faint smile. He chuckled. I think she's a little jealous. She's felt neglected. Do you love Emily? I asked, my voice trembling. You know I love Emily, he replied. She's been my best friend most of my life. Are you with her now? No, he said firmly. She's been my support, but she won't be with me until we're divorced. I couldn't hold back my tears. Are you serious about this divorce? Are you happy in our marriage? He countered. This is the longest conversation we've had in a year. I wish things were like they were before, but you can't turn back time. What's done is done. Ethan invited me to his cabin for a drink. The space was cozy and filled with personal touches, clearly a sanctuary for him and the kids. We shared a bottle of wine and talked late into the night about happier times. The next morning, I woke up in his arms. For a moment, I felt a spark of hope, but it faded when I realized nothing had happened. Ethan stirred, opening his eyes with a soft smile. We had a bit too much to drink last night, he said. We're still dressed, so nothing happened. Mark, I said, snuggling closer. Would you be interested? He hesitated, studying my face. When was the last time we? Over a week ago, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan raised an eyebrow, his expression softening slightly. I've never stopped finding you attractive, Clara. You're still a beautiful woman. Do you mean that? I asked, my voice trembling with vulnerability. Of course, he said firmly. I'm not going to lie about that. Ethan, I began, hesitating. I know you don't particularly like me right now, but would you entertain your wife? We haven't done anything in over a year and I miss being with you. He sighed deeply, pulling me closer. I'm sorry, he whispered. I shook my head, my voice cracking. Don't ever apologize. I know I forced this. I know you've closed off a part of yourself, and you can't give me that part anymore. Thank you for telling me I'm still beautiful, I whispered as tears welled in my eyes. Ethan stood and disappeared into the bathroom. I heard the shower running before he returned, dressed and ready for the day. As he reached for his bag, I stopped him. Can I have a hug? I asked, my voice barely audible. He paused, set the bag down, and wrapped his arms around me tightly, for the first time in a year. The hug felt like a goodbye, a symbol of something final. One last embrace before the inevitable end. I love you, Ethan, I whispered. I've never stopped loving you. He didn't respond, simply stepping back and picking up his bag. I followed him to the driveway, watching as he climbed into his SUV. Unable to resist, I waved. He honked the horn softly before driving away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. You're 18 now, Zara, and Matthew is 16, Ethan said later that evening, sitting at the kitchen table with Zara. I think it's time. Are you finally going to divorce her? Zara asked eagerly. You shouldn't be so excited, Ethan chided gently. Dad, your marriage has been a sham for too long, Zara insisted. You deserve to be happy with someone who loves you. I'll let Matthew know, Ethan replied. And when your mom gets back, I'll give her the paperwork. I'd prefer a joint application to make it faster. Your mom knows I want a divorce, so this shouldn't be a shock. Did you tell Emily? Zara asked with a knowing smile. Yes, he said. She wanted to wait until we were divorced, but we've waited long enough. I'll also discuss the living arrangements with your mom. When I came home, the atmosphere was subdued but civil. Ethan and I had spent Christmas together with the kids, and it had felt almost like old times. His side of the family was warm, and even mine seemed somewhat supportive. The thawing of our feelings toward each other allowed us to communicate better, though the closeness and love we once shared were gone. Talking to Ethan during the holidays had been bittersweet. We became friends again, but I could tell his feelings for me had changed permanently. A few nights after my return, Ethan asked me to stay at the table after dinner. Matthew and Zara had gone to their rooms, and the house was quiet. Ethan placed a stack of papers in front of me, his expression calm but serious. I didn't need to look to know what they were. My chest tightened and tears spilled over before I could stop them. I can't apologize for this, Clara, he said gently. The only thing that could have been different was doing it 12 months earlier. But I stayed to be near the kids. After I stopped hating you, I didn't mind sharing the house. We've kept our relationship separate and respected the boundaries. He reached out and took my hand, his voice steady. Read the papers. If you agree, we'll file them as a joint application. Zara is 18 now, so she's not considered a child. Matthew is 16, and I think he should stay here until he's 18. What do you want to do? That's up to you, Ethan, I whispered, wiping my cheeks. His eyes locked with mine as he added, I'm going to be with Emily after the divorce. I'll propose to her and likely move in with her. As for this house, you can buy me out or we can sell it. Are you going to stay here? I asked, my voice trembling. I don't plan to leave just yet, Clara. Our children are grown, and it's time for us to move on. I never wanted this, I said, my voice breaking. I know, Ethan replied softly. You wanted it to be short-term, but it lasted. I've told the women I've been seeing that I'm divorcing you and moving on with Emily. His words hurt, and I couldn't stop the fresh wave of tears. Ethan held my hand, his grip firm but comforting. If this was a year ago, he said, I would have said things that would have broken your heart even more. I don't want to do that now. I want to end our marriage on good terms. Emily warned you, didn't she? I asked, my voice shaking. She's always looked out for my best interests, he said simply. Can we stay friends, Ethan? We're already friends, aren't we? He said with a small smile. We've gotten closer in the past few months than we were in the year after your request. But our relationship isn't what it used to be. We have 2 children, and that will always bind us. When will you move out? I asked hesitantly. I'll coordinate with Emily, he said. If you want me to stay, I'll stay. But you'll have to accept Emily visiting in our relationship. I'm not sure I can live with that, I whispered. Then I'll leave, Ethan said gently. Emily is happy for me to move in with her. She really loves me. I looked at him, my chest tightening. I had no regrets until now, I admitted. Marrying you was the best day of my life, equal to the birth of our children. I loved you with all my heart for so long. Ethan nodded, his expression solemn. Go through the papers and sign them when you're ready. I'll talk to Emily and arrange a moving date. Clara didn't cry much. I hugged her and stroked her back, knowing I had just broken her heart. She had hoped we could save our marriage, but deep down, she knew I had mentioned divorce more than once. That evening, after moving to my side of the house, I called Emily to let her know I had given the papers to Clara. Emily tried to mask her excitement but couldn't help asking when I would move in with her. I already knew I'd be leaving soon, as Emily owned her house and was eager for us to start our life together. I didn't mind leaving the house to Clara, knowing she would likely agree to sell it once Matthew was old enough. The decision brought me relief, easing the tension I had carried for so long. Clara was upset but stayed composed. Zara overheard Clara talking to Tom on the phone, telling him she needed some time and explaining the situation. Clara disappeared the day I moved out, taking Matthew to her parents. They were already aware of everything, including our divorce. She signed the papers soon after, leaving only the court's final judgment to finalize everything. Emily came over while I was packing. I greeted her with a kiss, and together we loaded my car with boxes and suitcases. Emily carried a few smaller boxes herself, happily reminding me that her house was now our home. Leaving the house for the last time brought a mix of emotions. Clara and I had shared over 20 years of marriage, and while we didn't celebrate that milestone, the house held countless memories of the life we had built together. Before walking out the door, I left Clara a short note, something simple to make her smile. I no longer felt anger or bitterness toward her. It was time for both of us to move forward. When Emily and I arrived at her house, we unloaded everything and began settling in. I placed most of my clothes in the bedroom we now shared. "I've had several tests, Ethan," Emily whispered later that evening. "I'm still capable of having children." I smiled. "We can definitely talk about it." "I love you, Ethan. Over the past few months I've fallen in love with you. You've been my best friend for most of my life." "Believe me, I feel the same way now," I said, meeting her gaze. "When was the last time you were with someone?" she asked softly. "A couple of months ago," I admitted. "I got tested after my last time with Cindy. I'm fine. What about you?" She blushed. "I've been waiting for you to start the divorce. I couldn't be with anyone else." That night, Emily cooked dinner, and we ate at a candlelit table, sharing wine and easy conversation. After cleaning up, she led me to her bedroom. Emily was different from Clara in many ways, shorter, slimmer, and more understanding in her approach to life. 2 months later, a month after the divorce was finalized, I proposed to Emily during a quiet dinner at the harbor. She threw her arms around me when I slipped the ring onto her finger. At home, she thanked me over and over for making her so happy. When I told the kids about the engagement, Zara was thrilled. She adored Emily and had already grown close to her. Matthew, while happy for me, still quietly hoped Clara and I might reconcile someday. I didn't tell Clara directly. During the divorce proceedings, we had kept our distance, settling everything without meeting face to face. Emily didn't want a grand wedding. All she wanted was an engagement ring, a simple white dress, and a ceremony to exchange vows. Our wedding was small, attended only by close family and friends. Both of my children were there. Matthew surprised me by accepting the invitation, though I knew he felt torn between supporting me and staying loyal to his mother. I didn't invite Clara, knowing it would only hurt her to see me marry someone else. By that point, Clara and I were on better terms. She had even visited my house a few times, and Emily welcomed her graciously. But one day, Emily confided in me that Clara seemed to carry many regrets. On our wedding day, Emily was 5 months pregnant. She glowed with happiness, eagerly anticipating becoming a mother, and I couldn't wait to be a father again. That day was one of the happiest of my life. I wasn't invited to the wedding, and even if I had been, I probably wouldn't have gone. Despite everything, I was happy for Ethan and Emily. She looked stunning in the pictures, and I couldn't deny that Ethan seemed truly content. For a while I hated her. When Ethan moved out, I saw Emily as the woman who had taken my place. But those feelings faded after she invited me over, and we talked through everything. Marrying Ethan had been the best day of my life, rivaled only by the birth of our children. I regretted asking for an open marriage, especially when I acted on it immediately afterward. That was the day Ethan stopped loving and trusting me, the day our marriage began to fall apart. My relationship with Tom fizzled out after the divorce. Though I loved him, he would never leave his wife. We ended things on amicable terms, knowing it was for the best. Alone in the big house with only Matthew, as Zara had moved out for university, I felt the weight of my choices. Zara blamed me for much of what had happened, but she still visited on weekends. Mending our relationship would take time. Finding love again wasn't easy. Men like Ethan and Tom were rare. With Ethan, I had destroyed something beautiful, and Tom, while kind, was never fully mine. I dated occasionally but found most men insincere. Being honest about my divorce often led to judgment or hurtful comments. Years later, I met John, a man who seemed like a good match. We dated for a while, and though he was a decent partner, there was no spark like with Ethan or even Tom. I eventually decided to settle for companionship over passion. On Christmas Day, I went to John's apartment, only to find it empty. I discovered an address and drove there, finding John's car parked next to another unfamiliar one. At the house, a woman answered the door. "Hello, can I help you?" "I'm looking for John," I said cautiously. "And who are you?" she asked, her tone curious but wary. "I'm his mistress," I admitted, feeling a wave of shame. "I'm sorry, but I didn't know he was married." Her expression darkened. "You didn't know?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "He never wore a ring or mentioned you. I was in an open marriage before, and I never would have gotten involved if I'd known." She sighed deeply, nodding. "Thank you for telling me." Just then, John appeared in the doorway. His face paled. "Oh crap," he muttered. "You're an idiot, John," I snapped. "I never would have been involved if I'd known you were married." His wife, Diana, looked at me with a mix of gratitude and resignation. "I'm sorry you got dragged into this," she said quietly. "I'm sorry too, Diana," I replied, my voice softening. "I've been through something similar before, and I had no idea." Turning back to John, I added, "You're such an idiot. And by the way, it's over between us. I never lied about my past or my divorce, but you're just a cheating piece of crap." Getting back into my car, I refused to cry over him. I felt sorry for Diana and hoped they didn't have children, or that if they did, they were grown enough to handle a divorce without too much pain. Driving aimlessly around town, I thought about how John might try to paint me as crazy or lying, but I knew details about him only a wife would recognize. Eventually, I parked near the house I'd kept after the divorce but couldn't bring myself to go inside. Spending Christmas alone felt unbearable. Sighing, I turned the car around and drove to Ethan's house. Ethan opened the door, his expression softening as he saw me. Without a word, he pulled me into a hug as I cried into his chest. "I keep ruining everything," I sobbed. Another pair of arms wrapped around me unexpectedly. "Stay with us," Emily said gently. "You're still family, Clara." "Ethan, are you sure?" I asked hesitantly. He nodded. "You've always been welcome here, Clara. Our kids are here and you can spend time with Zara. Your family. Always." Emily smiled and added, "We'll just tell people you're Aunt Clara." I looked at Ethan, who still hadn't changed much since our divorce. He looked as happy as he had in the early years of our marriage. "Are you sure this is okay?" Both of them held my hands. "We're sure," Ethan replied firmly. "It's Christmas, Clara. A time for family, gratitude, and forgiveness. I've already forgiven you. It's time you forgive yourself." Zara smiled when she saw me and hugged me tightly as I held my grandson. Ethan's parents greeted me warmly, as did Emily's parents, who were polite and kind. Matthew hugged me for what felt like hours, his love and acceptance easing the ache in my chest. The day passed in a blur of warmth and laughter. Spending Christmas with such a loving family made me smile for the first time in weeks. Zara, her husband, and their child left in the afternoon, and Matthew left soon after to see his girlfriend. Both sets of parents departed early, leaving me alone with Ethan, Emily, and their 3-year-old daughter. As we sipped wine that evening, I told them everything that had happened with John. They listened with sympathy and understanding, and Ethan even offered to confront him, which made me laugh. "I couldn't stay all night," I said hesitantly, but Emily interrupted me. "You're not going anywhere tonight," she insisted. "We'll figure out where you'll stay tomorrow." "I'm planning to sell the house," I admitted. "It's too big for me now. I'll find an apartment or something smaller." "Please stay tonight, Clara," Ethan said. "We managed to live together for almost 2 years when things were tough. Now that we're friends, you don't have to leave." "Are you sure?" They exchanged a quick glance and smiled. "Pack your things," Emily said with a reassuring nod. "You'll always be welcome here." After a long shower, I stood in the hallway, watching Ethan read a bedtime story to their daughter. My chest tightened as memories of him reading to Zara came flooding back. Holding back tears, I quietly retreated to the guest room Emily had prepared. Ethan hugged me goodnight, and Emily followed with a warm embrace. "I hope we can be good friends," she said softly. "It means I'll get to see you more often." "Do you still love him?" she asked, her voice filled with empathy. I nodded, unable to speak as tears welled in my eyes. "I'm so sorry, Clara," she whispered. "I hope you understand." "I'm sorry too," I replied, my voice barely audible. I heard their bedroom door close and shut mine soon after. Lying in bed, I hated being alone, but it felt like the best option for now. There was no jealousy in Emily. She had the man she wanted, and I wasn't a threat to her. Maybe we could truly become friends. Tomorrow was another day. Eventually I would figure it out.